Good morning, everyone. My name is Theodore Strativinsomus, and I'm here to talk to you today about the brain. Something we all have, but not many of us use, particularly politicians. Okay, so the first part of the brain I'd like to talk to you about is the brain stem. This is the lower part of the brain that plays an important role in the regulation of the cardiac and respiratory function. It also regulates the central nervous system and is pivotal in maintaining consciousness and regulating the sleep cycle. Now there are three parts of the brainstem I'd like to talk to you about. The first is the medulla oblongata. This contains the cardiac, respiratory, vomiting, and vasomotor sensors. And it deals with autonomic functions such as breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. Very important, the medulla oblongata. The second part is the pons. Not like the chess piece, I know what you're thinking, but P-O-N-S. This contains nuclei that relay signals from the cerebrum to the cerebellum, along with nuclei that deal primarily with sleep, respiration, swallowing, bladder control, very important, hearing, equilibrium, taste, eye movement, facial expressions, basically everything. If you can name it, it does it. The last part I'd like to talk about is the midbrain. This controls the visual and auditory systems as well as eye movement, and is involved somewhat in control of body movement. So, you know, it controls the visual and audio systems so that you can see me here today, which I know you want to. Yeah, okay. The second part is the diencephalon. Obviously, this is not a very important part of the brain, otherwise it'd make it easy to pronounce like the pons. Like, I mean, you talk about your dog all the time, and dog's pretty easy to pronounce. You talk about your wife all the time, and your wife is pretty easy to pronounce. But the diencephalon, not easy to pronounce, not very important. But what it does anyway, it's the region of the brain that includes the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the epithalamus, the prethalamus or subthalamus, and the pretectum. Yes, anyway, the thalamus, which I just mentioned, it functions relaying sensation, special sense, and motor signals to the cerebral cortex, along with the regulation of consciousness, sleep, and alertness. The second part I'd like to talk about in the diencephalon is the hypothalamus. This links the nervous system to the endocrine system via the pituitary gland, controls body temperature, hunger, thirst, fatigue, and the circadian cycles. Ooh. Speaking of thirst, let me take a small break here. And I can taste that all due to my hypothalamus. Alright, next part of the brain is the cerebellum, which plays an important role in motor control. Not your car, but your body movement. It is also involved in some cognitive functions, such as attention and language, and probably in some emotional functions, such as regulating fear and pleasure responses, but its function and movement is most clearly understood. Basically what that's saying is, we know it makes you feel something, but we're not really sure how it does that. The cerebellum does not initiate movement, but it contributes to coordination, precision, and accurate timing. It's like the steering wheel of your body's car. It receives input from the sensory systems and from other parts of the brain and spinal cord, and integrates these inputs to fine-tune motor activity. Oh yeah, buddy. And the next part I'd like to talk to you about is the limbic system. It's a set of brain structures including the hippocampus, amygdala, and the anterior thalamic nuclei and limbic cortex, which supports a variety of functions including emotion, behavior, long-term memory, and olfaction. Excuse me. Alright, two of the parts I just mentioned, the amygdala, perform a primary role in the processing and memory of emotional reactions. But unfortunately, alcohol greatly damages this. So for all you drunken platypuses out there, you might want to avoid it. Hippocampus plays important roles in long-term memory and spatial navigation. Alzheimer's disease greatly hurts the hippocampus, and it's one of the first regions of the brain to suffer damage. It results in memory problems and disorientation, which are some of the first symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. The next part of the brain I'd like to talk to you about is the reticular formation, part of the brain that is involved in actions such as the awakening and sleeping cycle and filtering incoming stimuli to discriminate irrelevant background stimuli. So basically, when you're in class and you're sleeping and tuning out that boring Dr. Dean, it's your reticular formation that's helping you take care of that for you. There you go. Alright, the pituitary gland. Alright, it appears that there was a little malfunction in the lab, but I think we're okay now. If they call again, just hang up. Alright, the pituitary gland. It's considered a master gland. It secretes hormones that regulate homeostasis. You know, like when you're chilling with your buddies. Homeostasis. Including tropic hormones that stimulate other endocrine glands. It is functionally connected to the hypothalamus by the median eminence. The next part is the pineal gland. Now I know what you're thinking, and no, it does not regulate that. The pineal gland produces melatonin, which is a hormone that affects the modulation of wake and sleep patterns and seasonal functions. Like I said, not what you're thinking. The next part is the cerebrum. This is a very, very big and important part of your brain. It is the most superior region of the vertebrate central nervous system. Some of the parts of the cerebrum I'd like to talk to you about is the frontal lobe. This controls the ability to recognize future consequences resulting from current actions, to choose between good and bad actions, override and suppress unacceptable social responses, and determine similarities between things or events. I have no idea what that means, but that's a very important part of your brain. The primary motor cortex is involved in planning actions and refining movements based upon sensory input. That is part of the frontal lobe. And the primary somatosensory cortex, once again not very important because otherwise they would just call it dog, is the main sensory receptive area for the sense of touch. Another part of the cerebrum is the parietal lobe. It integrates sensory information from different modalities, particularly determining spatial sense and navigation. So it gives you a good feel of where you are in the world. Okay. Now, the next part is the temporal lobe. This is involved in auditory processing and is home to the primary auditory cortex. It is also important for the processing of semantics in both speech and vision. Then there's the occipital lobe, the visual processing center of the mammalian brain, containing most of the anatomical regions of the visual cortex. Finally not finally, but still there, is the corpus callosum. It facilitates communication between the two hemispheres, because as you can see by my model brain here, the brain is divided up into two hemispheres. There's the right and the left, and the corpus callosum allows these two halves to communicate with each other. I love brain. Okay. And then there's the gray matter. Now the gray matter makes up quite a bit of your brain. And the function of it is to route sensory or motor stimulus to interneurons of the CNS in order to create a response to the stimulus through chemical synapse activity. Very important stuff. And there's the cerebral cortex, not vortex. I know what you're thinking, Dr. Dean. Alright, it plays a key role in memory, attention, perceptual awareness, thought, language, and consciousness. And I know right now, as we close out this video, you probably wish that you weren't paying attention or conscious, but bear with me. We only have one more, which is the olfactory. I got it there. Bulb, which is involved in olfaction, which is the perception of odors. And trust me, this video stinks.